Have you ever wondered how a thin piece of paper can make a whole family argue until voices rise and doors slam? Have you ever noticed that when a family faces death, or inheritance, or old resentment, the smallest object can suddenly feel heavier than a mountain? Welcome back to the channel. Today I want to tell you a story that looks like it is about a certificate, but is actually about awakening, wisdom, karma, compassion, cultivation, and the turning of destiny across generation. Here are the two ideas we will carry the whole way. First, a refuge certificate is not only a document. It is a symbol of vow. It is a reminder of direction. It is a seed of blessing when treated with reverence and lived through conduct. Second, the way a family handles this symbol can reveal hidden attachments, hidden wounds, and hidden karmic habits. When you handle it with wisdom and compassion, you are not only placing paper, you are placing the heart back onto the path, and that can quietly shift the fate of the household. Let us begin with something very human. When people hear the word refuge, some minds immediately picture a ceremony. Incense, a teacher, a few sacred phrases, and then a certificate handed over at the end. A beautiful moment, a warm feeling, then life returns to normal. Some people think the certificate is basically a souvenir. They think it is just proof that you attended something. They think it has no practical impact. Then, someone passes away. Suddenly the family must touch the topics everyone avoids: mortality, legacy, regret, guilt, inheritance, responsibility. And in the middle of all that, someone opens a drawer and finds a refuge certificate. The paper is not loud. It does not scream. It just sits there. But the moment it is seen, the air changes. One person says it is important. Another person says it is meaningless. A third person says it should be kept. A fourth person says it should be thrown away. Someone says it brings blessing. Someone says it brings trouble. Someone says it is superstition. Someone says it is sacred. And then what looks like an argument about paper becomes an argument about identity, about control, about who is right, about who is filial, about who is spiritual, about who gets to decide what the family believes. This is why I say the certificate is not only paper. It is a mirror. Now I want to tell you a story. And as you listen, I want you to notice how many parts of your own life quietly appear inside it. There was a man named Daniel. Daniel was not a monk. He was not a scholar. He was just a normal person trying to live a decent life. He worked long hours. He had bills. He had stress. He loved his family. But he also carried impatience like an old habit he did not know how to break. Daniel's father, Robert, was also a normal man. He was practical. He was stubborn. He rarely talked about emotion. He believed in hard work and keeping problems inside. But late in life, something softened in him. It started when a friend passed away. Robert attended the funeral and came home quiet. For days he spoke less. Then one night, he said to Daniel, "I keep thinking about what happens after this. I do not know why, but I feel unsettled." Daniel did not know what to say. He wanted to say, "Do not worry." He wanted to say, "You will be fine." But the truth is, empty comfort often makes people feel even more alone. So Daniel just listened. A few weeks later, Robert's neighbor invited him to a refuge ceremony. Robert went. Daniel was surprised, because his father was the kind of person who used to roll his eyes at anything spiritual. But Robert went anyway. After the ceremony, Robert came home and placed a refuge certificate carefully in a folder. He did not announce it like a trophy. He did not preach. But something about him changed. He became slightly gentler. Not dramatically, just slightly. He complained less. Not always, just less. He apologized once when he was wrong. Daniel almost did not recognize him in that moment. Daniel thought, maybe this is just aging. Maybe he is mellowing. Then Robert got sick. It was not instant. It was a slow decline. hospital visits, medication. Then a clear diagnosis that carried a clear message. Time is limited. As the months passed, Robert became quieter. He spent more time sitting by the window. Sometimes Daniel would find him holding his folder. Not reading it, just holding it. Daniel asked one day, "Why do you keep that paper so carefully?" Robert said, "It is not paper to me. It is a reminder. It reminds me I made a vow to stop making my mind so ugly. It reminds me that I do not want to leave this world with hatred in my chest." Daniel did not reply. He felt something stir inside him, a mixture of respect and confusion. Then Robert passed away. The funeral arrangements were heavy, not only because of grief, but because the family had many old tensions. Robert's older brother, Uncle Frank, was controlling. He believed he should decide everything. Robert's sister, Aunt Linda, was bitter. She carried resentment about past family conflicts. Daniel's mother was exhausted and emotionally numb. Daniel himself was trying to hold everyone together while also trying not to collapse. And then the Refuge certificate appeared. Daniel found it in Robert's folder while gathering important documents. He did not even have time to process it. He simply placed it on the table. Uncle Frank saw it and immediately frowned. He said, "What is this?" Daniel said, "It is a Refuge certificate." Dad took refuge. Aunt Linda laughed sharply. She said, "Your father believed in that nonsense." Daniel felt anger rise, but he swallowed it. Because this was not the time for war, he said. It mattered to him. Uncle Frank said, "We should throw it away. It is useless." Daniel's mother, who had been silent, suddenly spoke. She said, "Do not throw it away." Everyone looked at her. Daniel had never heard her speak like that with such firmness. Uncle Frank said, "Why are you protecting a paper? He is gone." She replied, "Because it was his vow." The room became tense. The argument began like a slow fire catching dry grass. Uncle Frank said a vow is in the heart, not in paper. Aunt Linda said this is superstition, and it makes the family look foolish. Daniel said this is not about image. It is about respect. Someone said respect is practical, not symbolic. Someone said symbols shape the heart. The voices rose, and then a strange thing happened. Daniel realized they were not arguing about the certificate. They were arguing about something older. Uncle Frank wanted control. He feared losing authority. Aunt Linda wanted to release bitterness by mocking anything she could. Daniel's mother wanted to honor the one part of Robert that softened before he left. Daniel wanted peace, but he also wanted to protect his father's dignity. So the paper became a battlefield for old karma. This is where wisdom enters. When a family is in grief, the mind becomes raw. Old wounds open. Attachment becomes loud. Pride becomes louder. People try to soothe their own fear by controlling everything around them. This is why families often fight during funerals. It is not because they are evil. It is because the mind is panicking inside impermanence. But this is also the moment where cultivation can appear. Daniel took a breath. He looked at the certificate. He remembered his father's words. "I do not want to leave with hatred in my chest." Daniel realized, if we fight right now, we are doing the opposite of what this vow was meant to protect. So he did something that surprised everyone. He picked up the certificate carefully, placed it back into the folder, and said, "We are not going to decide this in anger. We will handle everything with respect. We can talk later." Uncle Frank tried to argue, but Daniel did not take the bait. He said, "Today we honor Dad. That is all." The room quieted, not because everyone agreed, but because Daniel refused to feed the fire. That night, after the chaos settled, Daniel sat alone. The house was quiet in the way that only a house after loss can be quiet. He opened the folder and looked at the certificate. It had Robert's name, the date, and the simple fact of refuge. Daniel did not feel magical energy. He felt something else. He felt responsibility. He realized a refuge certificate is a witness. It witnesses a turning point. It says, at least once, a person looked at suffering and said, I want a different direction. Now let me pause here and bring the teaching to you directly. Why would the placement of this certificate matter at all? Because placement is not only physical. Placement is mental. When you place something with reverence, you are training the heart. You are declaring, vows matter, direction matters, cause and effect matters. You are telling your mind, I will not treat what is sacred to someone else's trash. That training becomes karma. It becomes karma because it shapes your intention. Intention shapes speech. Speech shapes relationships. Relationships shape the atmosphere of the home. The atmosphere of the home shapes the next generation. This is how a single object can touch family destiny. Not by magic, but by conditioning. Now back to Daniel's story. A few days later, relatives returned for post-funeral gatherings. Someone brought up the certificate again. Uncle Frank repeated his opinion. Aunt Linda mocked it again. Daniel decided he would not argue with force. He would speak with wisdom. He said, let me tell you what Dad said to me. He said it was a reminder to stop making his mind ugly. If you do not believe in it, fine, but it helped him become gentler before he left. Are you really saying we should dishonor the one thing that helped him soften? Uncle Frank did not answer immediately. He looked away. Aunt Linda became quieter. Sometimes people do not change because of philosophy. They change because of humanity. Daniel's mother then said something that revealed another layer. She said, in our last month, he apologized to me for things I never expected him to apologize for. I cannot forget that. When I look at this certificate, I remember that he tried. That matters. The room shifted again. Now the question became practical. Where should it be kept? Some people imagine that this question has one correct answer, like a rule. But wise practice is not about rigid rules. It is about intention, respect, and wholesome consequences. So Daniel did not turn it into a fight about correctness. He turned it into a moment of shared cultivation. He said, we can keep it in a clean place. We can keep it with his important documents. We can keep it in a respectful corner. What matters is we do not treat it carelessly. Uncle Frank sighed. He said, keep it. Just do not make it a big thing. Daniel nodded. It is only big if we make it a weapon. We will not. That sentence is important. A sacred object becomes harmful only when the ego uses it to fight. When the ego uses it to judge others, to control others, to prove superiority. It creates new suffering. That is not refuge. That is attachment disguised as devotion. True refuge is humility. True refuge is compassion. True refuge is returning to wisdom when the mind wants to burn. Now I want to go deeper, because the title suggests something even larger. That this piece of paper could be a turning point for a whole family. How could that be? Because families often repeat patterns. A family might repeat harsh speech across generations. A family might repeat pride and control across generations. A family might repeat coldness and emotional avoidance across generation. A family might repeat conflict around money and inheritance across generation. A family might repeat bitterness and blame across generation. These are karmic habits living in a group body. When someone takes refuge sincerely, it can be the first crack in the old pattern. A vow enters the family field. It might not transform everyone immediately, but it introduces a new possibility. A new possibility says, we can respond differently. We can grieve without fighting. We can disagree without cruelty. We can honor without superstition. We can be practical without disrespect. We can face impermanence without turning into monsters. That is a turning point. Now I want to share something that many people feel but rarely say. Sometimes the certificate triggers conflict because it touches shame. A relative sees it and thinks, does this mean he was better than me? Someone sees it and thinks, does this mean I am wrong? Someone sees it and thinks, Does this mean I failed to guide him? Someone sees it and thinks, does this mean I must change my beliefs? So they attack the certificate to protect their ego. This is why compassion matters. When you see someone mocking, you can respond with anger and create more conflict. Or you can respond with understanding and still hold your boundary. Understanding does not mean agreeing. Understanding means seeing that their reaction is about fear and identity, not about paper. When you respond from understanding, you protect the family field from becoming toxic. That protection is merit. It is blessing. It is also destiny shaping. Now let us talk about what a refuge certificate represents in the inner life. It represents the moment you stopped drifting and chose direction. Most people drift. They drift into anger and call it personality. They drift into greed and call it ambition. They drift into gossip and call it bonding. They drift into addiction and call it stress relief. They drift into resentment and call it justice. Refuge is the moment you stop drifting. You say, I want awakening. I want wisdom. I want compassion. I want to live with karma awareness. I want to cultivate, not just survive. A certificate is a simple symbol of that moment. When you keep it respectfully, you are honoring that moment. When you treat it carelessly, you are training the mind that vows do not matter. Again, not magic, conditioning. Now I will tell you another story inside the story, because this is where the family destiny theme becomes vivid. After Robert's passing, Daniel started noticing a pattern. Whenever the family gathered, old conflicts resurfaced. Uncle Frank would criticize. Aunt Linda would mock. Someone would bring up money. Someone would blame. Someone would sulk. Daniel realized his father spent a lifetime in this field, a field of sharp ums and tight hearts. No wonder he carried heaviness. No wonder his late life refuge mattered. It was like a person finally finding a clean water source after years of drinking bitterness. Daniel looked at himself and felt a quiet fear. He asked himself, am I going to repeat this? Will my children grow up in the same field? So he made a vow. Not a vow that he announced loudly. A vow in the heart. He vowed that whenever the family gathered, he would practice three things. He would practice respectful speech. He would practice patience. He would practice a quiet kind of compassion that does not become weakness. The next family gathering tested him immediately. Uncle Frank criticized Daniel's mother for how she handled funeral expenses. His tone was sharp. The old Daniel would have snapped. He would have argued. He would have tried to win. That would have created a war. Instead, Daniel remembered Refuge as direction. He spoke calmly. He said, we can discuss details, but we will not speak to her with disrespect. She is grieving. We can be practical without being cruel. Uncle Frank scoffed. He said, you are becoming too sensitive. Daniel replied, no, I am becoming responsible. The room quieted again. Aunt Linda then tried to stir drama. She made a sarcastic comment about religion. Daniel did not attack her. He said, you do not need to believe, but you also do not need to mock what helped Dad become calmer. If you want to honor him, speak with kindness today. Aunt Linda rolled her eyes, but she stopped. The gathering ended with less damage than usual. This is how destiny turns. Not by one big miracle, by less damage. Less damage means less regret. Less regret means the mind is lighter. A lighter mind makes wiser choices. Wiser choices plant better karma. Better karma creates better family atmosphere. A better atmosphere shapes children. One sentence of restraint can protect a generation, more than 1,000 speeches. Now you might be thinking, what does this have to do with where you place the certificate? Everything. Because when you honor the certificate, you honor vow. When you honor vow, you honor discipline. When you honor discipline, you honor ethics. When you honor ethics, you protect relationships. When you protect relationships, you protect blessings. So the certificate becomes a training object. It reminds you, Do not drift. Return to breath. Return to right speech. Return to compassion. Return to karma awareness. Return to wisdom. Now let us talk about placement more directly, in a way that is practical but still rooted in cultivation. Many people fear two extremes. One extreme is treating it like garbage, stuffing it under clutter, folding it carelessly, leaving it where it can be stepped on or stained, tossing it in the trash during cleaning. That extreme trains disrespect. It also often creates conflict because someone in the family will feel hurt. The other extreme is turning it into a rigid object of control, forcing everyone to bow to it, using it to threaten relatives, using it to judge others, treating it like a magical talisman that guarantees luck while ignoring daily conduct. That extreme trains superstition and ego. It also creates conflict because people feel pressured. Wisdom is the middle way. The middle way is reverence without coercion, respect without arrogance, faith without forcing, symbol without superstition. So where should it be kept? Keep it where the intention remains clean. Keep it where it will not become a weapon. Keep it where it will be protected from physical damage. Keep it with other important documents if that is the most stable and respectful option. If your home has a small clean space for remembrance, a quiet shelf, a simple corner, you can keep it there. But the place is less important than the spirit. If the spirit is respectful, even a folder is a temple. If the spirit is arrogant, even a shrine becomes a battlefield. Now let us bring in a deeper layer that the title points toward, the family destiny layer. In many cultures, families keep objects that represent lineage, identity, or vow. A wedding ring, a family photo, a letter, a will, a recipe passed down. These objects carry stories. They carry emotion. They carry memory. A refuge certificate carries a vow to awaken. When you place it well, you are not worshiping paper. You are caring for a story. The story is, someone in this family tried to turn toward wisdom and compassion. This story can become a seed for children. Even if you never preach, children notice what adults treat with respect. They notice what adults protect. They notice what adults argue about. They notice the atmosphere. If they see adults handle the certificate with calm respect, they learn something about how to face death, how to face difference, how to face belief, and how to protect dignity. That learning becomes karma in them. If they see adults fight and mock and humiliate each other, they learn that too. And that learning becomes karma in them. So, yes, it can be a turning point, because it can be a moment where the family chooses a different way to behave. Now I want to share a reflection that often helps people who are skeptical. Some people say, it is just paper. Yes, it is paper. But your life is also a collection of small things that you treat as meaningless until you see their impact. A tone is just sound, but it can break a marriage. A rumor is just words, but it can destroy rest. A habit is just repetition, but it becomes your fate. A vow is just a sentence, but it can rewire a life. So do not underestimate symbols. Symbols are how human minds remember what matters. If you do not use symbols, your mind will still use symbols. It will use money. It will use status. It will use approval. It will use pride. It will use control. The question is not whether you will have symbols. The question is whether your symbols guide you toward awakening or toward suffering. Now, there is another part of this story that many people hide. Sometimes the certificate becomes important because the person who took refuge did not receive respect in life. They might have been criticized. They might have been ignored. They might have been treated as not good enough. Then late in life, they found a path that gave them dignity. They found teachings that told them their mind matters, their conduct matters, their future thoughts matter, their compassion matters. The certificate becomes proof that they were not only a worker, not only a provider, not only a problem. They were a person who made a vow. When the family throws it away carelessly, It can feel like throwing the person away again. This is why emotions explode around it. It is not paper. It is recognition. So if your family is arguing about a certificate, the wise action is not only deciding where to place it. The wise action is healing the deeper wound. The wound is often, did we respect the person while they were alive? If the answer is no, then your grief will carry regret, and regret will try to turn into anger. This is where compassion becomes the root. Instead of blaming each other, you can speak gently. You can say, "We all loved in imperfect ways. Let us honor what we can now. Let us not create more harm. Let us place this with respect and move forward with better speech." That is cultivation in the middle of family storm. Now I want to take you into another scene that makes this even more vivid. A month after Robert's passing, Daniel was cleaning the house with his mother. She opened a drawer and found the folder again. She held it like she was holding a fragile memory. She said, "I am afraid that after I am gone, people will throw everything away." Daniel said, "I will not." She looked at him and said, "It is not only about this certificate. It is about whether the family will remember how to be kind." That sentence hit Daniel deeply. He realized the certificate was almost like a teacher. It kept reminding them to return to kindness. Now, let us speak about what refuge truly means. Because if you understand refuge only as a ceremony, you will miss the whole point and you might also treat the certificate incorrectly. Refuge means you are choosing a path of awakening over drifting. When you feel anger, refuge means you return to breath before speech. When you feel greed, refuge means you remember consequences. When you feel pride, refuge means you soften into humility. When you feel fear, refuge means you trust wisdom and do the next wholesome action. When you feel sorrow, refuge means you allow grief without turning it into hatred. This is why a refuge certificate can affect destiny. It is not because the paper sends magic. It is because the vow, when remembered, changes the next choice. And the next choice changes the next consequence. And consequences accumulate into a life. Now I want to address a situation many of you will recognize. Some families include people with different beliefs. One person is devoted. One person is skeptical. One person is neutral. One person is resentful. In such a family, any spiritual object can become a trigger. So what is the wisest way to handle it? The wisest way is to avoid using belief as a weapon. If you are devoted, do not use the certificate to shame others. Do not say you are wrong. You are ignorant. You will be punished. That is not compassion. That is ego disguised as faith. If you are skeptical, do not mock. Mockery is cheapened, it creates long resentment. If you do not believe, simply be respectful. You can say, "I do not practice this, but I respect that it mattered to him." If you are neutral, be the bridge. Remind everyone that the goal is family harmony and dignity, not winning. If you are resentful, notice your resentment. It is not about the paper. It is about your old pain. Do not pour your pain onto the dead. The dead cannot defend themselves. Speak your pain in a healthier place. This is wisdom. This is compassion. This is karma awareness. This is cultivation. Now I want to talk about one more layer that often appears in families: the fear of misfortune. Some people fear that placing the certificate incorrectly will cause bad luck. Others fear that keeping it will cause trouble. Here is the balanced view. Luck is shaped mainly by conduct, not by placement. But placement can influence conduct by influencing the mind. If placing it respectfully reminds you to speak kindly, then it supports good karma. If obsessing over placement makes you fight and judge, then it creates bad karma. So the real question is, does this object help your family become kinder and wiser? Or does it become fuel for conflict? If it becomes fuel for conflict, the most important practice is not relocating it. The most important practice is purifying intention and speech. Do not sacrifice harmony for the sake of appearing correct. Do not sacrifice compassion for the sake of winning a debate. If you want to honor the vow of refuge, speak as if your words are planting seeds in your children's minds. Because they are. Now let us bring Daniel's story to its turning point. 6 months passed. The family settled somewhat. Conflict reduced, not because everything was healed, but because time calmed the heat. Daniel continued visiting his mother weekly. Each visit, he noticed something. His mother was lighter when the house felt respectful. She was heavier when relatives argued. One day Daniel did something simple. He framed the certificate and placed it inside a clean folder behind the frame, then placed it in a quiet cabinet with important documents, along with a small note in plain language. The note said, "This certificate mattered to Robert. Please handle it respectfully. Please do not fight over it. If you do not believe, simply keep it as memory." He did not make it public. He did not demand anyone bow. He simply created a peaceful future. This is a powerful form of compassion. Compassion for the future. Later, Aunt Linda visited. She noticed the frame. She asked, "Why did you keep it?" Daniel said, "Because Dad tried. Because it reminds me to speak gently. Because I do not want our family to stay trapped in old patterns." Aunt Linda looked away. Her eyes softened for a second. She said quietly, "He was stubborn. I never thought he would take refuge." Daniel said, "Neither did I. That is why it matters. It shows people can change even late." Aunt Linda sat down and after a long silence she said, "I have been angry at him for years. Now he is gone. I feel stupid." Daniel did not lecture. He simply listened. Then he said, "If you want to honor him, speak well of him now. And if you want to honor yourself, let your anger rest." That was the moment the certificate did its deepest work. It became a doorway to forgiveness. Forgiveness is not forgetting harm. It is releasing the prison. When you release the prison, your heart becomes lighter. When your heart becomes lighter, your life becomes smoother. This is how destiny turns. Now, I want to share something that often creates a deep resonance for viewers. Many of us carry family karma that we did not choose. We inherited tempers. We inherited silences. We inherited pride. We inherited fear. We inherited ways of arguing. We inherited ways of avoiding love. So when a symbol like a refuge certificate enters the family story, it can become the first small tool for rewriting the script. Not by forcing everyone to become religious, but by giving the family a chance to practice respect. Respect is a spiritual practice even without labels. Respect is right speech. Respect is compassion. Respect is wisdom. Respect is karma awareness. Now let us talk about what you can do if you are the one holding a certificate right now, especially if the person has already passed. I am not going to turn this into rigid instruction. I will speak in the spirit of cultivation. Handle it gently, not because paper is sacred by itself, but because your intention matters. Keep it clean and protected, not because dirt brings punishment, but because care trains the heart. Do not use it to shame family members, because that is ego, not refuge. If family members disagree, choose harmony over victory. Speak softly. Keep boundaries calmly. Let the certificate remind you to live the vow in daily life, because if you do not live it, the symbol becomes empty. The greatest respect you can give a refuge certificate is not a perfect placement. The greatest respect is a life that becomes kinder. If you speak harshly every day, then even if the certificate sits on a perfect shelf, the family field still leaks blessings. If you practice patience and honesty, then even if the certificate is kept quietly in a folder, the vow is alive. This is the true teaching. Now I want to share a closing reflection that is long enough to land in your heart, because this topic is not really about paper. It is about the kind of human being you want to become when life becomes real. When people die, the masks fall away. What remains is the heart. What remains is the weight of regret, or the peace of sincerity. A refuge certificate is a small reminder that a human heart can choose a new direction. Even late, even after a lifetime of habits, it says, awakening is possible. Wisdom is possible. Compassion is possible. Cultivation is possible. Destiny is not only inherited, it is also created. If you are living in a family that argues easily, you can be the turning point. Not by preaching, not by forcing, but by living the vow quietly. Speak with less poison. Apologize faster. Hold boundaries without cruelty. Stop gossip that burns harmony. Treat elders with respect. Treat children with patience. Do good without needing applause. Remember impermanence when pride tries to win. If you do that, your home becomes a practice hall, and your family destiny becomes lighter. Not because you changed the past, but because you stopped planting the same heavy causes today. Now I want to invite you to share your story in the comments. Have you ever seen a family fight over a small object after someone passed away? Have you ever felt that grief revealed old karma in the family? And if you are holding a refuge certificate or something similar, what did it awaken in you? Subscribe to the channel if you want more long-form teachings told through real-life stories, with practical guidance rooted in awakening, wisdom, karma, cultivation, and destiny. Like the video so it reaches someone who is in the middle of family conflict and needs a calmer way. Comment to join the conversation. And if you want to support the channel so we can keep creating deeper long talks, consider becoming a member. Thank you for spending this time with me. Treat symbols with respect, but treat hearts with even more respect. Let every object that reminds you of vow become a doorway back to kindness. And step by step, watch how one family can slowly turn from conflict to clarity, from heaviness to blessing, from drifting to awakening.
Every person carries a certain energy. Your focus, your dreams, your purpose. Bracelet is a physical reminder of that energy. Symbol you wear daily. That pushes you to stay grounded, balanced, and aligned. If one of the bracelets caught your eye, you can order it through the link in the description. And check more powerful styles on our homepage store. Choose the one that strengthens your journey.